Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 1 through chapter 3, verse 29. Then we turned and set out toward the desert land, on the way to the Red Sea, just as the Lord told me to do, detouring around Mount Seir for a long time. At this point the Lord said to me, "You have circled around this mountain long enough. Now turn north. Instruct these people as follows. You are about to cross the border of your relatives, the descendants of Esau, who inhabit Seir. They will be afraid of you, so watch yourselves carefully. Do not be hostile toward them, because I am not giving you any of their land, not even a footprint, for I have given Mount Seir as an inheritance for Esau. You may purchase food to eat and water to drink from them. All along the way, I, the Lord your God, have blessed your every effort. I have been attentive to your travels through this great wasteland. These 40 years I have been with you. You have lacked for nothing." So we turned away from our relatives, the descendants of Esau, the inhabitants of Seir, turning from the desert route from Elat and Ezion-Geber, and traveling the way of the Moab wastelands. Then the Lord said to me, "Do not harass Moab and provoke them to war, for I will not give you any of their land as your territory. This is because I have given Ar to the descendants of Lot as their possession. The Emites used to live there, a people as powerful, numerous, and tall as the Anakites. These people, as well as the Anakites, are also considered Rephaites. The Moabites called them Emites. Previously, the Horites lived in Seir, but the descendants of Esau dispossessed and destroyed them and settled in their place, just as Israel did to the land it came to possess, the land the Lord gave them. Now get up and cross the Wadi Zered." So we did so. Now the length of time it took for us to go from Kadesh Barnea to the crossing of Wadi Zered was 38 years. Time for all the military men of that generation to die, just as the Lord had vowed to them. Indeed, it was the very hand of the Lord that eliminated them from within the camp until they were all gone. So it was that after all the military men had been eliminated from the community, the Lord said to me, "Today you are going to cross the border of Moab, that is, of Ar. But when you come close to the Ammonites, do not harass or provoke them, because I am not giving you any of the Ammonites' land as your possession. I have already given it to Lot's descendants as their possession. That also is considered to be a land of the Rephaites. The Rephaites lived there originally. The Ammonites called them Zamzamites. They are a people as powerful, numerous, and tall as the Anakites. But the Lord destroyed the Rephaites in advance of the Ammonites, so they dispossessed them and settled down in their place. This is exactly what he did for the descendants of Esau who lived in Seir, when he destroyed the Horites before them, so that they could dispossess them and settle in their area to this very day. As for the Abites, who lived in settlements as far west as Gaza, Caphtorites, who came from Crete, destroyed them and settled down in their place. Get up, make your way across the Wadi Arnon. Look, I have already delivered over to you Sihon the Amorite, king of Heshbon, and his land. Go ahead, take it, engage him in war. This very day I will begin to fill all the people of the earth with dread, and to terrify them when they hear about you. They will shiver and shake in anticipation of your approach." Then I sent messengers from the Kedemoth desert to King Sihon of Heshbon with an offer of peace. "Let me pass through your land. I will keep strictly to the roadway. I will not turn aside to the right or to the left. Sell me food for cash so that I can eat, and sell me water to drink. Just allow me to go through on foot, just as the descendants of Esau who live at Seir and the Moabites who live in Ar did for me, until I cross the Jordan to the land the Lord our God is giving us." But King Sihon of Heshbon was unwilling to allow us to pass near him, because the Lord our God had made him obstinate and stubborn, so that he might deliver him over to you this very day. The Lord said to me, "Look, I have already begun to give over Sihon and his land to you. Start right now to take his land as your possession." When Sihon and all his troops emerged to encounter us in battle at Jahaz, the Lord our God delivered him over to us, and we struck him down, along with his sons and everyone else. At that time we seized all his cities and put every one of them under divine judgment, including even the women and children. We left no survivors. We kept only the livestock and plunder from the cities for ourselves. From Aroer, which is at the edge of Wadi Arnon, it is the city in the Wadi, all the way to Gilead, there was not a town able to resist us. The Lord our God gave them all to us. However, you did not approach the land of the Ammonites, the Wadi Jarbuk, the cities of the hill country, or any place else forbidden by the Lord our God. Next we set out on the route to Bashan, but King Og of Bashan and his whole army came out to meet us in battle at Edrei. The Lord, however, said to me, "Don't be afraid of him, because I've already given him his whole army and his land to you. You will do to him exactly what you did to King Sihon of the Amorites who lived in Heshbon." So the Lord our God did indeed give over to us King Og of Bashan and his whole army, and we struck them down until not a single survivor was left. We captured all his cities at that time. There was not a town we did not take from them, 60 cities, all the region of Argob, the dominion of Og and Bashan. All of these cities were fortified by high walls, gates, and locking bars. In addition, there were a great many open villages. We put all of these under divine judgment, just as we had done to King Sihon of Heshbon, every occupied city, including women and children. But all the livestock and plunder from the cities we kept for ourselves. So at that time we took the land of the 2 Amorite kings in the Transjordan, from Wadi Arnon to Mount Hermon. The Sidonians called Hermon Syrian, and the Amorites call it Senir. All the cities of the plateau, all of Gilead and Bashan as far as Selica and Edrei, cities of the kingdom of Og and Bashan. Only the king Og of Bashan was left of the remaining Rephaites. It is noteworthy that his sarcophagus was made of iron. Does it not indeed still remain in Rabbath of the Ammonites? It is 13.5 feet long and 6 feet wide according to standard measure. This is the land we brought under our control at that time. The territory extending from Arwar by the Wadi Arnon, and half the Gilead hill country with its cities I gave to the Reubenites and Gadites. The rest of Gilead and all of Bashan, the kingdom of Og, I gave to the half-tribe of Manasseh. All the region of Argob, that is, all Bashan, is called the land of Rephaim. Jair, son of Manasseh, took all the Argob region as far as the border with the Geshurites and Maacathites, namely Bashan, and called it by his name, Havoth Jair, which it retains to this very day. I gave Gilead to Makir. To the Reubenites and Gadites I allocated the territory, extending from Gilead as far as Wadi Arnon. The exact middle of the wadi was a boundary, all the way to the Wadi Jabbok, the Ammonite border. The Arabah and the Jordan River were also a border, from the Sea of Chinnereth to the Sea of the Arabah, that is, the Salt Sea, beneath the watershed of Pisgah to the east. At that time I instructed you as follows. The Lord your God has given you this land for your possession. You warriors are to cross over before your fellow Israelites equipped for battle, but your wives, children, and livestock, of which I know you have many, may remain in the cities I have given you. You must fight until the Lord gives your countrymen victory, as he did you, and they take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving them on the other side of the Jordan River. Then each of you may return to his own territory that I have given you. I also commanded Joshua at the same time. You have seen everything the Lord your God did to these 2 kings. He will do the same to all the kingdoms where you are going. Do not be afraid of them, for the Lord your God will personally fight for you. Moreover, at that time I pleaded with the Lord, O Lord God, you have begun to show me your greatness and strength. What God in heaven or earth can rival your works and mighty deeds? Let me please cross over to see the good land on the other side of the Jordan River, this good hill country in Lebanon. But the Lord was angry at me because of you and would not listen to me. Instead, he said to me, Enough of that. Do not speak to me any more about this matter. Go up to the top of Pisgah and take a good look to the west, north, south, and east, for you will not be allowed to cross the Jordan. Commission Joshua and encourage and strengthen him, because he will lead these people over and will enable them to inherit the land you will see. So we settled down in the valley opposite Beth Peor. Let's see here. I think we started, just in 2:1. You are about to pass through the territory of your brethren, the descendants of Esau. The descendants of Esau were distant relatives to the people of Israel. 400 years earlier, the brother of Jacob was Esau. God didn't want Israel to take the land that he gave to Esau and his descendants, the Edomites. Edom was a nickname for Esau. Perhaps the most famous Edomite in the New Testament was Herod the Great. He was hated by the Jews because he was an Edomite, but he wanted to be received and respected as a Jew. Do not meddle with them, for I will not give you any of their land. Israel was not just some conquering army out to take whatever land it could get. It probably was strong enough to simply take the land of Edom, but Israel only received what God had promised to them. You shall buy food from them with money. You shall also buy water. God commanded Israel to treat the Edomites with respect, even though they could have dominated them as a stronger nation. How we treat those weaker than ourselves is always a good measure of character. When we have the capability to dominate or abuse others and do not, it shows that we have good character. For some of these reasons, God commanded Israel to treat the weaker nation of Edom well. I think it's also interesting too. This is another reason why it's important to know our Bibles, in that we can cherry pick something and get a wrong view of God. For instance, you have the passage that says, Jacob have I loved and Esau have I hated, type thing. And if you were to just take that at face value with the human definition of hate and, I guess, love, then you would come away with some weird theology where God loves some but hates others. But isn't it so that God loved the world? Well, then what is this hate for Esau? I believe that the hate being talked about in that passage is lesser love. That is, preferentially, he's preferred Jacob over Esau. And as supporting evidence for that, you have here in Deuteronomy 2 a description of how God supported the Edomites in battle. That is, he helped them to conquer a foe that was strong, because the Rephaites were a strong people. Like the Rephaites, the Anakim, were a race of giants, essentially. They were very tall people and mighty. And the Lord delivered their land over to Edom. As such, that doesn't seem like the actions of one who hates a particular people group. And also here, he says to Israel, you won't go in and take their land from them because I've given it to them. And beyond that, you'll buy your food from them with money and also buy your water from them with money. Lesser love rather than a human hatred. Passed by way of the wilderness of Moab. The Moabites were also distant relatives to Israel. They descended from Lot, who was the nephew of Abraham. And as with Edom, God did not want Israel to harass Moab, nor contend with them in battle. Their land was not the land God intended to give Israel. One of the more famous Moabites in the Bible was Ruth. She was a Moabite woman who married an Israelite man named Boaz and became grandmother to King David and one of the ancestors of the Messiah. The Emim had dwelt there in times past. The Moabites were of note because they defeated a Canaanite people known as the Emim, who were a large, fearsome race, as were the Anakim. The term translated giants here is actually the Hebrew word Rephaim. The term Rephaim is often translated giants, but it actually means fearsome ones. The Rephaim were a group of large, warlike people who populated Canaan before the Israelites. In the area east of the Jordan River, they were known by many names. The Moabites called them Emim. The Ammonites called them Zemzamin. 38 years. In these brief verses, Moses covered 38 years of Israel's wandering in the wilderness. This was a period when they just took up time, waiting for the generation of unbelief to die, so that the generation of faith could take the promised land. I will not give you any of the land of the people of Ammon. As with the Edomites and the Moabites, the land of the Ammonites was also not for the people of Israel. Yeah. Did he just skip over the man with the iron bed here? Because it was a big bed. Maybe that was next chapter. Yeah, that was next chapter. Whoops. Sihon, king of Heshbon, would not let us pass through. Because of this refusal, Israel fought a battle recorded in Numbers 21. They simply asked for safe passage through the land of the Amorites, but they were refused. And not only that, but they Sihon marshaled troops to come out and fight against them. The Lord your God hardened his spirit and made his heart obstinate, that he might deliver him into your hand. God worked behind the scenes in hardening the heart of Sihon, the king of the Amorites. It was right for God to do this because the Creator has the right to do whatever he pleases with his creatures. But it was also right because of the way God did it. God did not persuade a reluctant Sihon to act out against Israel. God simply let Sihon's heart take the evil way it wanted to take. God did not change Sihon's heart from good to bad, but hardened it in its malice towards Israel, that he might deliver him into your hand. This explains why God hardened the heart of Sihon. God led Sihon into the destructive course that his heart desired, so that the land of the Amorites became the possession and inheritance of Israel. Yeah. It's a scary thing when God gives us what we want sometimes. Utterly destroyed the men, women, and little ones of every city. We left none remaining. The war against the Amorites was one of the unique wars of judgment God told Israel to fight. In it, Israel was not just to defeat the Amorites on the field of battle, but to bring judgment against their whole society. There was not one city too strong for us. 38 years before, Israel refused to go into the Promised Land because they felt they were overmatched militarily. Here, when they began to enter the land by faith, God showed them how it could have been 38 years before if they had only believed him. Yep. And regarding Og, do not fear him, for I have delivered him and all of his people and his land into your hand. As Israel continued closer to the Promised Land, moving westward towards the Jordan River, they passed through the land of Og, king of Bashan. And we took all his cities at that time, 60 cities. This brought Israel even more territory to occupy on the east side of the Jordan River, and it showed them that they could, through the power of God, overcome the mighty enemies they would confront on the west side of the Jordan River. Apparently, Og was the last of the Rephaim in his area on the east side of the Jordan River. The repeated references to the Rephaim in these first 3 chapters show that Israel, when trusting in God, was well able to defeat this race of fearsome warriors. It also shows that their fear of these men, back in Numbers 13, where they first refused to go into the Promised Land, was unfounded. Their excuses are shown to be weaker in light of the next generation's victories. Og's bedstead was 14 feet by 6 feet in modern measurements. Some commentators believe this actually describes his burial sarcophagus. Yeah, as we saw with the NET, translating it sarcophagus rather than bed. And this land, which we possessed at that time. These 2 1/2 tribes decided that this land on the east side of the Jordan River was good enough for them, and the Lord allowed it, if they would fulfill the obligations mentioned in the following verses. Yeah, and I guess concerning Og as well, he was one of the Rephaites, or Anakim, as was Goliath. So And I commanded Joshua at that time. Joshua had a huge job to do, to bring a whole nation into a land where they would not be welcome, and where they would have to fight to possess what God had rightfully given them. You must not fear them, for the Lord your God himself fights for you. With this huge challenge in front of him, Joshua is encouraged to remember all that the Lord your God has done to these two kings. Remembering God's past faithfulness is key to present and future victory. Then I pleaded with the Lord, that is, Moses pleaded with the Lord, let me cross over and see. Moses knew God was rich in mercy and forgiveness. He knew there was no harm in asking God to relent from his previous judgment, that Moses would not see the promised land. We can appreciate what a painful thing this was for Moses. He lived the first 40 years of his life confident in his own ability to deliver Israel. He spent the next 40 years of his life having that confidence demolished as he tended his father-in-law's sheep. He spent the last 40 years of his life being used of God to do what he was called to do. Now he was not allowed to see the end result. No wonder Moses pleaded with the Lord. Enough of that. Speak no more to me of this matter. God did not want to hear Moses' appeal on this matter. Because of his sin at Meribah, where he misrepresented God as being angry with Israel when he was not, Moses could not enter the promised land. This may seem an excessively harsh punishment for Moses. It seemed that after only one slip-up, he then had to die short of the promised land, but Moses was being judged by a stricter standard because of his leadership position with the nation, and because he had a uniquely close relationship with God. It is right for teachers and leaders to be judged by a stricter standard, though it is unrighteous to hold teachers and leaders to a perfect standard. It is true the people's conduct was worse than Moses, but it is relevant. Worst of all, Moses defaced a beautiful picture of Jesus' redemptive work through the rock which provided water in the wilderness. The New Testament makes it clear this water-providing, life-giving rock was a picture of Jesus. Jesus, being struck once, provided life for all who would drink of him. But it was unnecessary and unrighteous that Jesus would be struck again, much less again twice, because the Son of God needed only to suffer once. Jesus can now be approached with words of faith, as Moses should have only used words of faith to bring life-giving water to the nation of Israel. Moses ruined this picture of the work of Jesus God intended. Speak no more to me of this matter. Moses was a great man of intercession, perhaps one of the greatest in the Bible. Yet God would say no even to Moses in prayer. God will sometimes say no even to his mightiest intercessors. Go up to Pisgah. This was the place where Moses would be able to see the promised land from a distance and then die, and where the book of Deuteronomy will end. But command Joshua and encourage him and strengthen him. It was probably easy for Moses to have a bad attitude here. Well, if I'm not going into the promised land, I'm sure not going to knock myself out training my replacement. But that was not the heart of Moses. He would do everything he could to love the people, prepare them to go in, and to make Joshua a success. A man of God would not do it any other way. Moses had the heart of a true shepherd. He knew that his ministry was not centered on himself and his own satisfaction, but on God and his people. In fact, Moses' death is not recorded until chapter 34, so that the whole book of Deuteronomy is framed between the announcement of Moses' impending death and the announcement of his actual death. The book is thus, in a sense, the spiritual testament of Moses, Israel's great lawgiver. Cool. Well, thank you for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.